The deception, the Cax Music Empire, had ruled the Orion arm of the galaxy. For over 3,000 years, their ships were legends whispered across 100 worlds, sleek vessels of crimson and black that brought either tribute, demands, or destruction. No species had ever successfully resisted them. The empire stretched across 47 star systems, encompassing colonies, mining operations, and slave worlds that fed the insatiable appetite of the Cryax. Throne world. On a humid September morning in 2247, that ancient empire made its greatest mistake. They discovered Earth. The research vessel Pathfinder had been conducting a routine survey of exoplanets in the outer reaches of the solar system when the Cryax warcruiser appeared. Captain Elena Vasquez barely had time to send a distress signal before the alien ship opened fire. The Pathfinder exploded. A brilliant flash, taking 43 souls with it. The message reached Earth 5 hours later, along with fragmentary video footage of the attackers in the United Earth Command headquarters in Geneva. President Sarah Chin watched the footage. For the 7th time, the alien ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of humanity's largest vessels. Its weapons had reduced the Pathfinder to atoms in seconds. They didn't even try to communicate, said General Robert Zio, his weathered face tight with anger. No warning, no demands, just murder. Admiral Marcus Webb stood near the window, watching rain streak down the glass. At 58, he was one of the youngest admirals in Earth's Defense Forces, career officer who had spent 3 decades preparing humanity for threats that might never come. Now one had arrived, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. We need to respond, insisted Ambassador David Foster, his voice rising. Send a diplomatic mission, open channels, let them know we're a civilized species. They already know we're civilized, Marcus said, quietly turning from the window. That's why they attacked. The Chronics don't negotiate with equals. They conquer or they destroy. President Chin leaned forward. Admiral, what are our options? Marcus pulled up a holographic display. Blue dots represented Earth's military assets scattered across the solar system. 214 ships, ranging from small patrol craft to heavy cruisers. Against a single Cax warcruiser, they would last perhaps an hour. Against the Empire's full might, they would be annihilated in days. Militarily, we can't win a conventional war, Marcus admitted, but we might be able to win an unconventional one. Over the next 6 hours, Marcus outlined a plan so audacious that several council members initially thought he was joking. Earth would not prepare for open war. Instead, they would appear weak, defeated, desperate. Every encounter with the Crix would be carefully staged to reinforce the illusion that humanity was technologically inferior and militarily helpless. Meanwhile, in secret, they would build the most powerful fleet the galaxy had ever seen. You're proposing we lie down and let them think they've won, said General Zio, while our people die. I'm proposing we make them believe we're not worth their full attention, Marcus corrected. Every species they've conquered, they've crushed immediately with overwhelming force. We need them to think we're already crushed while we prepare to hit them with everything we have. President Chen studied the Admiral's face. How long would this take? 7 years minimum. 10 would be better, and in the meantime, we take casualties, we sacrifice assets. We can afford to lose. we let them win. Small victories while hiding our real strength. Marcus' jaw tightened. It won't be easy. People will die, but if we fight them now, everyone dies. The vote was unanimous. Operation Mirage was approved. 3 weeks later, the Chronics returned. This time they brought 5 ships to Earth orbit and broadcast a message in perfect English. Translation algorithms had clearly been working overtime. Primitive species of the third planet, the message began. Delivered by a creature with 6 limbs and scales that shimmered like oil on water. I am Commander Vexter of the Krik's Imperial Fleet. Your system now belongs to the Empire. You will surrender all military vessels and prepare to receive occupation forces. Resistance will result in the sterilization of your planet. In the command center, Marcus watched with his senior staff as Earth's response was transmitted. It had been carefully crafted to sound defiant but ultimately helpless. This is Earth defense. Command, replied Colonel Jennifer Park, her voice shaking just enough to sound authentic. We will not surrender. This is our home. The CAC's response was immediate. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking 3 carefully chosen targets: an abandoned military base in Nevada, a decommissioned satellite array in Kazakhstan, and an evacuated research station in Antarctica. The explosions were spectacular and absolutely harmless to anyone, but to the Cryaks it looked like humanity had tried to fight and been effortlessly crushed. Your defenses are pathetic. Vexter's voice came again. This was your warning. Surrender now or watch your cities burn. This time President Chin herself responded. The performance was worthy of an award. We surrender. Please don't hurt our people. We in LT Unc and GT LL comply with your demands. In the Cryak's command ship, Vexter made a sound like grinding metal, the equivalent of a dismissive laugh. Another primitive species broken. In hours, this would barely merit a mention in his report. He left a single garrison ship in orbit and departed with his fleet to deal with more pressing matters. The humans were conquered and clearly posed no threat. As soon as they Crack's ships disappeared beyond Jupiter's orbit, Marcus activated the real plan. Deep in the Kuiper Belt, beyond Neptune's orbit, construction had already begun. Automated mining drones stripped ice and metal from frozen asteroids. The raw materials were processed in hidden facilities, converted into hull plating, weapon components, and engine parts. The work happened in the perpetual darkness of the outer solar system where no casual observer would ever look. Dr. Catherine Lau headed the research division, a brilliant physicist who had been working on theoretical weapon systems. She now had unlimited funding. In a single mandate, build something that could kill Krik's ships. Their shields operate on a rotating frequency, she explained to Marcus during his first inspection tour of the research station. They cycle through 17 different modulation patterns to defend against various weapon types. Conventional lasers and kinetic weapons can't penetrate fast enough, so we build unconventional weapons, Marcus said. Catherine smiled. Exactly. Developing a plasma cannon that fires a contained magnetic bottle. When it hits their shields, the bottle collapses and releases a star-hot plasma burst directly against their hull. No time to adapt, no time to adjust frequencies. How long until we have working prototypes? 18 months for testing. Another year to manufacture them. Quantity, Marcus nodded. Make it faster. If you can, but don't sacrifice safety or effectiveness across the solar system. Similar projects were underway. New hull materials that could withstand temperatures exceeding those found on the surface of the sun, shield generators based on captured cryax. Technology improved and enhanced, faster than light drives that could jump a ship across the solar system in minutes. Instead of hours, stealth systems that made human ships nearly invisible to cryax sensors. And humanity-built ships, not the small patrol craft and cruisers of the old fleet, but massive warships, designed for a single purpose, to destroy the cryax empire. Meanwhile on Earth and the established colonies on Mars and Luna, the deception continued. Every 3 months, the cryax garrison ship would demand tribute. Earth would comply, sending raw materials and manufactured goods. The quantities were carefully calculated to seem like everything humanity could scrape together, when in reality they represented less than 2% of actual production. Commander Vexther's reports to the Empire were consistent. The humans were broken, compliant, and technologically stagnant. A garrison force of 3 ships would be more than sufficient to maintain control. But Marcus had also activated another crucial element of the plan: intelligence gathering. Commander Isabella Santos led a team of operatives who had one job: infiltrate the Cryax Empire and learn everything about it. The cryax had conquered dozens of species, and many of those species still existed as slave populations on Empire worlds. It wasn't difficult for human agents, with some cosmetic modifications and sophisticated holographic disguises, to blend in among the conquered peoples. Over 6 years, they mapped the Empire's infrastructure, identified key military installations, and most importantly, discovered the Empire's weaknesses. They're overextended, Isabella reported. During a secure communication, Empire controls 47 systems, but they're stretched thin. Most garrison forces are minimal because conquered species never rebel. They've never had to deal with a coordinated resistance. What about their home world? Marcus asked lightly. Defended. They don't expect attacks. Why would they? No one has ever struck back at the cryax. Marcus felt a cold smile form. They're about to learn what happens when someone does. Year 7 arrived with humanity's secret fleet, nearly complete, 2,000 warships each, one incorporating technology the cryax had never imagined: plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, shield systems that could absorb punishment for hours, crews trained to perfection in realistic combat simulations. The civilian population had been quietly relocated. Mars colonies expanded exponentially, hidden underground. New settlements were established on moons throughout the outer solar system. By the time the fleet was ready to launch, 92% of humanity's population was safely away from Earth. The planet itself became a trap. They think they've conquered us, Marcus said to his assembled ship captains on the day of final briefing. They think Earth is theirs. They're about to discover they've been nurturing a predator. Captain James Rodriguez of the warship Retribution asked the question on everyone's mind: what are our rules of engagement, Admiral? Marcus' expression was granite. The Kinax showed us their nature 7 years ago, when they murdered 43 people without warning or mercy. They've spent those 7 years believing they had conquered us. Now we show them what humanity does to tyrants. He pulled up a star map, showing the Krik's empire, red dots marked military installations, fleet bases, and the throne world itself. We strike everywhere at once, not to conquer, not to occupy, to liberate every world they control, every species they've enslaved. We'll see human ships arrive as liberators. The Kriks will face an enemy on every front simultaneously. Admiral Marcus Webb looked at the faces of his commanders. These men and women had spent 7 years training in secret, building weapons in darkness, and waiting for this moment. Behind them stood the might of an angry species that had learned patience and planning from their enemy's arrogance. The Krik's empire has stood for 3,000 years, Marcus said. Today we end it. Launch Operation Hellstorm. 2,000 ships powered up their engines in the darkness of the Kuiper Belt, the greatest armada humanity had ever built, prepared to bring judgment to an empire that had never known defeat. The Chronics thought they had conquered Earth. They had no idea what was coming for them. The deception was over. The reckoning was about to begin. The reckoning, the Kryax throne world of Kryax's prime basked in the light of twin suns, its crimson sky dotted with orbital platforms and defense stations that had never fired a shot in anger. Why would they? No enemy had ever reached the heart of the empire. The very concept was absurd. Emperor Zell Kororax reclined in his crystalline throne, his scales catching the morning light as he reviewed reports from the outer territories. The numbers were satisfying as always. Tribute flowed from 47 conquered systems, feeding the empire's endless appetite for resources and labor. His attention briefly touched on the report from the Sol system. The humans continued their compliance, delivering materials on schedule. Primitive but obedient, he dismissed the report without a second thought. 300 million M from Earth. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the warship Defiance, his flagship. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of 2,000 human vessels, arranged in precise formation. 7 years of preparation had led to this moment. 7 years of appearing weak while growing strong. 7 years of patience that was about to pay off in violence. All ships report ready, Admiral, said Commander Lisa Torres, her fingers dancing across the tactical console. Jump coordinates locked, stealth systems at maximum. Marcus took a deep breath. Somewhere out there, the Kryax garrison ships orbiting Earth were about to receive the shock of their existence. Across the empire, on worlds where alien species toiled under Chronix rule, human agents were preparing to activate rebellion. And here at the tip of humanity's spear, 2,000 warships prepared to strike at the heart of an empire that had never known fear. All ships, Marcus said, his voice carrying to every vessel in the fleet. This is Admiral Webb. 7 years ago, the Kryax murdered 43 of our people and declared us conquered. They thought we were weak. They thought we would submit. Today we teach them the most important lesson humanity has ever delivered to tyrants. We do not forgive, and we do not forget. He paused, letting his words sink in. Across the fleet, 200,000 souls held their breath, waiting for the order that would change galactic history. Execute Operation Hellstorm. Jump. 2,000 ships vanished in a cascade of quantum distortions, disappearing from the Kuiper belt and reappearing simultaneously at 17 different locations across the Cax Empire. The coordinated strike was perfect, the result of years of intelligence gathering and tactical planning. No empire in galactic history had ever faced an attack on the scale. At Earth, the three Cryax garrison ships were monitoring their automated sensors when space itself seemed to tear open. 50 human warships materialized in perfect attack formation, their weapons already charging. The Crix commanders barely had time to broadcast the distress signal before the plasma cannons opened fire. The magnetic containment bottles struck the Cryax shields and collapsed instantly, releasing torrents of star-hot plasma directly against the alien hulls. The shields, designed to deflect conventional energy weapons, were useless against this new technology. The first garrison ship exploded in a brilliant flash of vaporized metal. The second managed to raise its shields to maximum, buying itself perhaps 5 additional seconds of existence. The third attempted to flee, its engines burning at full power, but quantum torpedoes caught it before it could jump. The warheads phased through the shields using technology the Cryax had never encountered and detonated inside the ship's reactor core. 18 seconds after the human fleet arrived, Earth's orbit was clear of enemy vessels for the first time in 7 years. Captain Elena Rodriguez, now commanding the warship Vengeance, watched the debris field expand on her displays. Clean sweep, she reported to Admiral Webb over the quantum communication network. Earth is secure. Beginning Phase 2. Phase 2 was liberation. Human ships spread throughout the solar system, moving to the hidden Crix mining operations on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. The alien overseers never saw the attack coming. Within hours, thousands of enslaved workers from a dozen different species were freed, many of them weeping at their first taste of freedom in generations. But Earth was just one target across the Cax Empire. Similar scenes were unfolding with devastating precision at the industrial world of Darvix. 200 human warships dropped out of FTL directly above the Crix military shipyard. The orbital defenses designed to repel conventional attacks were completely unprepared for humanity's new weapons. Plasma cannons tore through shield emitters and hull plating like paper. Quantum torpedoes disabled the shipyard's reactor cores without triggering catastrophic explosions, preserving the facility for future use. Commander Michael Chen led the ground assault, his troops descending in armored drop ships to the planet's surface. The Crix garrison numbered 5,000 soldiers, veterans of countless conquests. They had never faced an enemy that fought with humanity's combination of technology and fury. The battle was brief and brutal. Human combat suits enhanced strength and speed while providing shields that absorbed Cryax energy. Weapons, advanced targeting systems allowed human soldiers to fire with impossible accuracy. But it wasn't just the technology that overwhelmed the Crix defenders. It was the intensity, the relentless aggression of soldiers who had spent 7 years preparing to avenge murdered friends and family. Within 4 hours, Tharvix was liberated. The enslaved populations, seeing their oppressors defeated, rose up to assist the human forces. The Crix had ruled through fear for so long that they had never considered what would happen if that fear was broken. On the mining colony of Jexar, Captain Sarah Kim led a Smaller strike force of 30 ships. Cryak's presence was minimal, just a single garrison vessel and a few dozen overseers when human ships appeared, broadcasting messages of liberation in 17 different languages. The enslaved workers simply stopped working. They surrounded the Cryak's overseers, waiting to see what would happen. The garrison ship attempted to fire on the human vessels. It was destroyed before its weapons could finish charging. Overseers, seeing their ship reduced to expanding gas, surrendered immediately. They were taken into custody, held for eventual trial. Humanity had not forgotten justice in its quest for vengeance, but the most important strike was happening at Cryak's Prime itself. Emperor Zalkar was in the middle of a state dinner when the alarms began. His security chief, Commander Draxoth, burst into the chamber without ceremony, his scales pale with shock. Majesty, we are under attack. The Emperor rose slowly, his massive frame towering over the assembled nobles. Impossible, the throne world's defenses are impregnable. What primitive species has lost its mind? The human's majesty, for the first time in his 3-century reign, Emperor Zalkorax felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. The humans were supposed to be conquered. They were supposed to be broken. Compliant, helpless, he rushed to the command center where holographic displays showed a nightmare. 500 human warships had appeared in orbit around Caxus Prime. The orbital defense platforms were exploding one after another as plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes ripped through shields and armor. The Emperor's personal fleet of 200 vessels was scrambling to respond, but they were designed for conquering primitive species, not fighting an enemy with superior technology. Admiral Marcus Webb watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the Defiance. His tactical officers called out reports as human weapons systematically dismantled. 3,000 years of Cryak's military superiority. Defense Platform 7 destroyed. Platform 8 disabled. The Cryak's fleet is attempting to form a defensive screen. Break them, Marcus ordered coldly. Target their command ships first. I want the Emperor blind and isolated. The human fleet moved with precision that spoke of years of training. They had studied Kinak's tactics, analyzed every available recording of Empire battles, and developed counters to every strategy. The Krix fought with the confidence of a species that had never lost. Humanity fought with the desperate skill of a species that couldn't afford to lose. It wasn't a fair fight. Cronek's command ships exploded as quantum torpedoes phased through their shields. Their energy weapons splashed harmlessly against human shield technology that could absorb and dissipate tremendous amounts of energy. Their missiles were intercepted by point defense systems that never missed. Their fighter craft were swatted from space by automated targeting systems that tracked hundreds of targets simultaneously. Within 2 hours, the orbital space around Cryak's Prime belonged to humanity. Emperor Zalkorax watched his empire crumble on the displays before him. Reports flooded in from across Imperial space. 17 systems under simultaneous attack. Garrison forces destroyed or surrendering. Enslaved populations rising in rebellion. The industrial worlds that fed the Empire's war machine were falling to human forces that seemed to appear from nowhere and strike with impossible precision. How, he whispered, how did primitives develop such Technology, Commander Draxoth had no answer. None of them did. The intelligence reports had been clear. The humans were broken, their technology inferior, their military capability negligible. Everything they had believed was a lie. Admiral Marcus Webb's face appeared on every display across the throne world. His expression was carved from ice. Emperor Zelorax, I am Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Fleet. 7 years ago, your forces murdered 43 of my people without warning or provocation. You declared us conquered and imposed your rule on our world. You thought we were weak because we didn't immediately fight back. The Admiral's eyes were hard as diamonds. You were wrong. We weren't weak. We were patient. While you believed us conquered, we built the largest fleet this galaxy has ever seen. While you extracted tribute from Earth, we were developing weapons you cannot defend against. While you thought you ruled us, we were infiltrating your empire and learning every weakness. Marcus leaned forward. Your orbital defenses are destroyed. Your fleet is disabled. Your military installations across 17 systems have fallen. The species you enslaved are rising against you. Your empire is finished. In the command center, the Emperor's scales had turned gray with shock. Around him, his commanders and nobles stared at the displays in disbelief. 3,000 years of conquest ended in a single day by a species they had dismissed as primitive. I offer you one chance, Marcus continued. Surrender. Now, order all Kryax forces to stand down, face trial for your crimes, or we will reduce your throne world to ash and hunt down every Kryax ship in the galaxy until your species exists only. History books. The threat hung in the air on his ships throughout the system. Marcus' crews waited with weapons charged. They had the capability to deliver on his promise. Every person in that command center knew it. Emperor Zorax felt the weight of history pressing down on him. His empire had conquered dozens of species. None had ever fought back effectively. None had ever threatened the throne world. The Krix had believed themselves invincible, chosen by destiny to rule the galaxy. Now a species they had tried to conquer was offering them the choice: surrender or extinction. If I refuse, the Emperor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus' expression didn't change. Then I demonstrate what happens when humanity stops showing mercy. Your choice. You have 1 hour. The connection cut. In the command center of Kryaxis Prime, the rulers of a 3,000-year-old empire looked at each other and realized they had no choice at all. The humans had weapons that could destroy their world. They had already proven their capability by dismantling the Empire's defenses in hours, and unlike the Krix who conquered and enslaved, the humans were offering terms, harsh terms, but terms that would allow the Kinax species to survive. 57 minutes later, Emperor Zalkorax made the broadcast that ended his empire. Standing before the cameras, his scales dull and his posture defeated, he spoke the words that no Kryax ruler had ever imagined, saying, "This is Emperor Zalkorax. I hereby order all Kryax military forces to cease hostilities immediately and surrender to human forces. The Empire accepts the terms offered by Admiral Webb. The age of Kryax rule is over. Across 17 star systems, Kranax commanders received the order with shock and disbelief. Some refused, attempting to continue fighting. They were destroyed quickly. and efficiently. Most, however, recognized the reality of their situation and complied. The empire that had seemed eternal had fallen in a single day. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Marcus Webb allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 7 years of planning, 7 years of building and preparing in secret, 7 years of appearing weak while growing strong. It had all led to this moment. Begin landing operations, he ordered. Secure the throne world, take the Emperor and his command staff into custody, and send word to all liberated worlds. The Kryax Empire is finished. The age of tyranny is over. As human troops descended to Kryax's prime, the reality of what had happened began to sink in across the galaxy. The Kryax, who had ruled for 3 millennia, had been defeated in a single day by a species they had thought conquered. News spread from world to world, carried by the same communication networks the Empire had used to enforce its rule. On enslaved worlds, populations rose up against their oppressors, knowing that help had arrived. Species that had suffered under Kryax rule for centuries saw human ships appear in their skies and wept with joy. Galaxy was witnessing something unprecedented, a complete reversal of power executed with precision and overwhelming force. But Marcus knew that hard work was just beginning. Defeating the Empire was one thing, building something better in its place would be the real challenge. 3 weeks after the fall of Kryax's prime, representatives from 47 former Imperial systems gathered on Earth. The conference chamber in Geneva had been expanded to accommodate beings of wildly different sizes and atmospheric requirements. Through the windows, the blue curve of Earth's horizon was visible, a reminder of the world that had orchestrated the Empire's fall. Admiral Marcus Webb, now appointed as the Terran Coalition's ambassador, stood before the assembled delegates. Some were former slaves, freed by human forces. Others were representatives of species that had fought alongside the Krix and now found themselves on the losing side of history. All of them were uncertain about the future. The Kryax Empire ruled through fear and oppression. Marcus began his voice, carrying through the chambers. Translation systems, they conquered and enslaved. They extracted resources and labor without concern for the suffering they caused. That age is over. He gestured to the holographic display, showing the former Imperial territory. Humanity did not fight this war to replace one empire with another. We fought for freedom, not just our freedom, but the freedom of every species that suffered under Krik's rule. Delegate from the Vexgar species, a four-armed being with luminous eyes, spoke up. But who will maintain order? Who will protect trade routes? Who will prevent conflicts between worlds? The Empire provided structure, even if that structure was oppressive. Marcus nodded. Valid questions, which is why I'm proposing the formation of the Galactic Coalition, a voluntary association of free worlds, each maintaining its sovereignty while working together for mutual defense and prosperity. The chamber erupted in discussion. The concept was radical. For thousands of years, the galaxy had been ruled by empires. The strong conquered the weak. Resources flowed to the center. The idea of a voluntary association of equals was almost incomprehensible to many of the delegates. But what about the Kryax? Demanded a delegate from the J species. They enslaved my people for 800 years. They murdered billions. What justice will there be? Marcus' expression was grave. Emperor Zorax and 300 senior commanders are currently in custody. They will stand trial for crimes against sentient life. The trials will be public and fair. Those found guilty will be punished according to the severity of their crimes. He paused, letting that sink in. But we will not punish the cry species as a whole. They were born into an imperial system, raised to believe conquest was their right and destiny. We will hold individuals accountable for their actions, but we will offer their species a chance to join the new galactic order as equals. The debate continued for weeks. Some species wanted harsh retribution against the Kryax. Others feared that humanity, having defeated the Empire, would simply establish its own rule. Marcus and his team worked tirelessly to address concerns, negotiate agreements, and build consensus. Finally, 6 weeks after the fall of the Empire, the Galactic Coalition Charter was signed by representatives of 39 worlds. Document established principles of sovereignty, mutual defense, free trade, and individual rights that would govern relations between member species. It wasn't perfect and many challenges remained, but it was a beginning. The trials of Cax war criminals began 3 months later. Emperor Zelkorax was tried first, charged with ordering the murder of the Pathfinder's crew and crimes against billions of sentient beings during his 3-century reign. The evidence was overwhelming, gathered from imperial records that the Kinax had kept with meticulous detail. Marcus attended the trial, sitting in the public gallery as the emperor was led into the courtroom in restraints. The once proud ruler looked diminished, his scales dull, his posture defeated. When the guilty verdict was read, Zalkorax showed no emotion. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on a remote station, where he would spend his remaining years isolated from the power he had wielded for so long. Not execution, not torture, just imprisonment and the knowledge that his empire had fallen and would never rise again. It was a very human form of justice. 6 months after Operation Hellstorm, Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the observation deck of the orbital station above Earth, watching ships arrive and depart, vessels from dozens of different species carrying trade, goods and diplomats, travelers and students. The galaxy was learning to live without the Empire, and while there were challenges and conflicts, there was also hope. Dr. Catherine Lau joined him at the window, her reflection visible the transparent aluminum. Did you ever imagine it would work? She asked quietly. The whole operation, I mean 7 years is a long time to maintain a deception. Marcus was silent for a moment. There were nights I wondered if we were making a terrible mistake, letting people die and stage defeats, watching the critics think they had won. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but necessary. Yes, if we had fought them immediately, we would have lost. Humanity would have been exterminated. Earth would be an empty rock. Instead, we're standing here watching the birth of something new. Catherine smiled. The Galactic Coalition, still strange to say. It's strange but real. Marcus turned from the window. The Klanex thought they knew us. They thought we were weak. Because we value peace, they made the same mistake bullies always make. They confused patience with weakness. On the planet below, in cities that had survived 7 years of apparent occupation. Humans went about their lives with the knowledge that they had done the impossible. They had defeated an empire that had ruled for 3,000 years, not through brute force alone but through planning, patience, and the willingness to appear weak while growing strong. Story of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy, told and retold in 100 languages. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had taught the galaxy a lesson that would echo for generations. Technology matters, strategy matters, but the will to fight for freedom matters most of all. The Krik's empire had reeled in shock when humanity's Armada arrived. Their judgment had fallen without mercy, and in the ashes of their tyranny, a new galactic order was born, built not on conquest but on cooperation, not on fear but on hope. The age of empires was over. The age of the coalition had begun, and it had started with 43 murdered souls on the Pathfinder, whose deaths had been answered with patience, planning, and the fury of a species that refused to submit. Marcus Webb, looking out at the stars, allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy had learned what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. Now it would learn what humanity could build when given the chance. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in 3,000 years, it belonged to all species equally, and that Marcus thought was worth every sacrifice they had made.